It's March 25th, 2015. This is the Arizona Mining Review. I'm your host, Lee Allison, here at the Arizona Geological Survey in Tucson. And we're pleased today to announce that we have our underwriter, Mining Foundation of the Southwest, supporting the production of this show. Well, I was recently down in the town of Sahuarita for the ribbon cutting at Asarco's new Avalon solar project on disturbed lands. And I was honored to be one of the speakers at that event. And so we have footage from that event and some of my remarks. I also got a chance to talk to some of the other mining industry folks who were there and the impact of solar development on disturbed lands from mining operations. And we also have an interview with Ken Green from the Fraser Institute on the new survey of mining executives about mining properties, mining jurisdictions around the world.
Thank you, Krishna. It's amazing to see the progress that's been made in 9 months when we were back here in May for the initial groundbreaking, and I'm just staggered to see the accomplishments here. So to everybody who's been involved, it's unbelievable. I'm really honored to be here and included in the activities today. And it's exciting to see this marriage between the mining industry and the renewable energy segment. You know, renewable energy requires an infrastructure built with metals and minerals. We need sand and gravel for the base. We need limestone for the cement. We need steel for the frame. We need silicon for the solar panels. And we need copper. Lots and lots of copper for the motors, the transmitters, the generators, the lines to move the electricity into the grid and turn that sun energy into electricity for all of us. Last year, Arizona was the #1 mining state in the United States. Primary production exceeding over $8 billion. And most of that came from copper, molybdenum used in steel manufacturing, sand and gravel, aggregate and cement, all the things that are used to build this kind of facility we produce here in Arizona. I think you've heard that Apple Computer is building a $2 billion data center up in Mesa. And it's going to be powered, like all of its data centers worldwide, by renewable energy. And here in Arizona, entirely by solar energy. And our modern society is increasingly demanding more and more minerals for our new technology. And the estimate is that we need 5% more of our base metals every year to meet the demand for cell phones, hybrid vehicles, and renewable energy plants like the one we're launching today. And if this trend continues, a recent scientific study in one of the world's most prestigious journals estimated that we're going to have to increase our metal production so that in the next 15 years, we as a society will have to produce as much metal as all of society has done since the dawn of civilization. And we need that to build the modern environmentally conscious economy that we're looking for. So it's become clearer that the wise use of our natural resources, including our mineral resources, is the crux of building an environmentally sustainable society. So this marriage of mining and renewable energy that we're celebrating here today is symbolic as well as a practical implementation of this technology. There's a growing realization that the benefits of mining and generating power locally are really where we're headed, where we have to go. In 2007, the word of the year was locavore. Locavore is a person interested in eating food that's locally produced, not moved long distances to market. And the locavore movement in the U.S. and elsewhere really spawned as an interest in sustainability and eco-consciousness, and it's become more prevalent. We're seeing a movement now to promote, and let me quote, more metal production near centers of demand, similar to the locavore movement. Green technology should incorporate domestic mining, which reduces the financial and environmental costs of transporting metals from far-flung sources, decreases the carbon footprint, provides jobs and wealth to the local community. The same holds true for energy production. And so this Avalon solar project is a prototype of what the mining industry can be doing to contribute to sustainable energy, sustainable economy, and a sustainable environment. So all of you involved in this project are what I call the new environmentalists. You're leading the fight for a more sustainable world by efficiently providing the resources that our technological society needs and reducing the global environmental impacts. transitioning us to a truly renewable energy society. A sustainable environment demands that we mine and produce our electricity, our power, and our minerals locally. So thanks for all of you who have been involved with this, for what you've done for Arizona, for the nation, for our economy, and for the environment. Thank you.
Krishna, it was a great ceremony this morning, but tell us some of the genesis of this project. How did it get started?
Lee, again, thank you. And I'm glad that you could join us and deliver a few remarks. This project started out in 2010. I was asked to represent the mining perspective at a conference that was organized by the EPA. This was in Los Angeles. The TEP representative was there.
Tucson Electric Power.
Tucson Electric Power. Yeah. Amanda Stone from ADEQ was there. And the program is called Repowering America, America's Contaminated Lands. And so I was at this conference and providing the mining industry perspective. That's where Carmine Tillman and I met. And that, in a way, is kind of the birth of this, goes back to the birth of this project.
Okay, so 5 years, but it's
5 years in the making. Yeah.
So are you generating electricity now?
Yes. We started generating electricity on December 23rd. Oh. And it's been going reasonably smoothly thereafter.
Okay, so you've got 35 megawatts now.
Yes.
You've got a second phase coming on sometime later this year.
Yes. By the end of the year, we hope to have the second phase completed. And that'll bring the capacity of the plant to 56 megawatts. And would be the largest in TEP's portfolio, and would probably be the largest at a mining site, a photovoltaic on a mining site.
Well, that brings up a good point. Does Asarco now look at this as a test case of maybe developing renewable energy on other mine sites?
Yeah. Yes, the answer is yes. And our vision has been to consider a solar project, especially in Tucson area, as a viable post-mining land use. And that's where we would have liked to have done, but this project provided us an opportunity, and we thought this might be a good way to get our feet wet. At the Mission Mine, we have 2 tailings dams, number 7 and 8, that we will be closing in the next 2 or 3 years. These will be capped, and our hope is that they would prove to be, we'd have to do some studies, but we hope that they will prove to be suitable for siting a solar project.
How big would those projects be on the scale of what you have here?
Yeah, because each of those tailings dams would be around 400 acres. So that's in the realm of the kind of the scale that we have right now, which is about, I would say, 40 to 50 megawatts.
Okay. So that would make it one of the largest solar projects around anywhere in the country, I would suspect.
Yes, I would. And the general vision, and another thing I'd like to add, Lee, is that we have reclaimed lands on tribal property, and these are about 1,300 acres of tailings. And EPA has already been in the process of studying these sites. These have been reclaimed in 2012. And they have found, preliminary studies have found that this would be suitable for a tribal, for a solar site. Okay. And if we are hoping that in the future, some kind of solar project also takes off on tribal lands, and if we do something on our capped tailings dams, we would hope that southern Tucson becomes the solar capital of the United States.
It certainly sounds you could do that very quickly.
Yes.
Well, congratulations again on a great project, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lee.
Frank, you've had a long history with the mine over here and the Mineral Discovery Center. What do you think about this project with the solar, what it means for this mine, and what it might mean for mines across Arizona and across the country?
This is far beyond my expectations of what I thought I would see when I got here today. This is absolutely terrific. And what happens here is the example that's set by the Mission Mine and by the Asarco people for other mines around the country, across the world. I mean, it isn't just the country, but it's around the world. If you go down to Chile, you've got a lot of sun in Chile. If you go, you know, to Utah, you don't have quite as much sun, but nevertheless, there is an example that's being set in terms of renewable energy and doing it where you've got amounts of land that you can do it on, and that's really quite unique.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me is that we have so much land that's been disturbed as part of mining around an operation. Can we reuse it? Can we recycle the land by putting renewable energy projects on those
Absolutely.
sites?
In fact, the tailings dams and the spoils piles up here could actually be used for that in a very aggressive way. Okay. And at some point in time in the future, I have no doubt that they will be. That the fact that this is down here in the flats right now, yes, and close to the mine, obviously with the mine's collaboration on the project is just super. I started working here 49 years ago, 49 years ago this year, and that's to see sort of the responsible approach that is being taken at this point in time is just beyond my wildest imagination.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to coming back here one day and see all of these tailing piles with solar panels.
I have no doubt that that'll happen.
Fantastic. Frank, thanks very much.
You bet.
Well, joining us now via Skype is Ken Green, the Senior Director for the Center for Natural Resources at the Fraser Institute in Calgary. Ken, welcome back to the show.
It's good to be with you.
Well, great. And we've asked you back here because the Fraser Institute has just released the 2014 version of the survey of the mining industry, and you're going to give us some updates. And so I think for a lot of folks, they're familiar with it, but some of the new viewers here may not be familiar with this annual survey you do. So can you give us a little bit of background on what is the survey and how you carry it out?
Sure. We've conducted the survey in a variety of jurisdictions starting since 1997. And the point of the survey is to create a tool really for governments to be able to assess whether or not their policy environment in their mining jurisdictions would invite investment or would deter investment. And so we survey senior executives across the mining industry on 15 different policy dimensions, including things like whether the levels of uncertainty about environmental regulations would attract or deter investment, whether uncertainty about native land claims would attract or deter investment, whether uncertainties about the enforcement of regulation would attract or deter investment. And we've asked those same questions now, as I said, for many, many years, and we take the responses, we normalize them, we rank them, and we report them, along with some open comments that we get from members of the industry. This year, we've included 122 valid jurisdictions. That means that we got more than 10 responses from each jurisdiction, and we surveyed over 4,000 executives and got a better than 10% response rate, which for an internet survey is not bad.
Ken, just the jurisdictions, that's not only national governments, but it's states, it's provinces, it's territories.
That's right. We use the word jurisdictions because we're trying to distinguish the level of regulatory oversight, right? So it could be a state, it could be a province, it could be a country, it could even be a subnational or even sub-jurisdictional area like West Australia or offshore Russia or something like that.
Okay. Well, and one of the things we're interested in talking to you about is how Arizona fared. And we've been following this for the past few years. So how did Arizona come out overall in the survey this year?
This year, Arizona did fairly well. Came out 18th out of 122 jurisdictions on our investment attractiveness index, the 6th in the United States on our purely the policy perception index, and 24th in the world on that same policy perception index. So a very respectable performance.
Okay, and are we moving up or down, or I suspect there's a little bit of variation each year from survey to survey?
There is, and partly because one jurisdiction might move up. Others changes happen because other jurisdictions actually move down. And so you can't always just assume that because you've changed in the rankings, it's because of a change that you've made. These are relative rankings with other groups. I actually don't have your 5-year trend right in front of me. I could step off camera and grab it if you'd like.
No, that's all right. We can probably pull that up and add it to the broadcast here as we're preparing
you
this.
basically, actually, I'm looking at your PPI, the your policy perception index from 1998 to 2014. While there have been a few bumps and valleys, you're pretty level. Right now, you're around 70. You rank around 70, and back when we first started, you were right around 65 to 70 as well. So when we started including you in the survey back in 1998, which is when you were first added to the survey. So you're pretty stable.
Okay. Well, I guess in some ways that's good. We always hope here that we'd be moving up in the rankings, but it's, again, it's, can you describe a little bit exactly what the investment attractiveness index is, and also the policy perception index?
Sure. So let's start with the latter. The policy perception index looks at is that index of 15 questions that are really about the regulatory environment. Is the competitiveness of the tax regime attractive? Is the property rights regime attractive to investment or deterring investment? And it takes those and it does it without weighting them. It averages them, normalizes them, and creates an index just so that 0 means you're not deterring anything, or 100 means you're best. You have very low levels of deterrence and you're quite attractive. 0 means that you're not doing very well. The investment attractiveness index takes into account whether you actually have any minerals in the ground, right?
Okay.
It's a combination of our mineral potential index, where we ask people how they assess the mineral potential of the jurisdiction. That's given a 60% weight, and the policy perception index is given a 40% weight to create the overall investment attractiveness index.
Okay.
And the reason we do that is because if you were to look at purely policy, some area that has virtually no mineral potential, right, also has no regulatory environment, probably.
Okay.
And so you could have anomalous findings where you have a jurisdiction that someone just found a really big mineral deposit, and everybody says, "Whoa, this is a great place because it's totally I could just go in and start digging." And we want to avoid those kind of anomalous findings where people are trumpeting themselves as a jurisdiction, sort of without regard to whether they actually have any minerals in the ground or whether they actually have any good regulatory system.
Okay, as I look at the charts you put together for us here, particularly on the policy perception index, where you've pulled together U.S. states, one of the questions would be, well, isn't this largely driven by federal requirements, federal regulations? But what I see is we range from Wyoming being number 8 out of 122 to the state of Washington being 68 out of 122, and Arizona kind of on the upper side at 24th. So that suggests that if I'm coming in from looking at this in a global perspective, it's not just federal regulations, but the state regulatory environment must play a very significant role in this.
That's right, and that's the reason we report jurisdictions.
Right.
And as you know, of course, in the United States, particularly, there's a big variance between privately owned lands and mineral rights and publicly owned land and mineral rights with regard to the east and west of the country in different states. So the state regulatory policy, regulatory framework plays a part. One of the questions we ask about is, for example, does infrastructure lead you to find a jurisdiction more attractive to investment or less so? And that is generally a function of the state, right? There's the jurisdiction, the creation of infrastructure is a function of that's executed at the level of the state. The extent of the geologic database is both national, but also, as you're sitting there at the Arizona Geological Survey, right? Right. States do their own geological surveys. So there's a mixture in the United States, because the actual oversight is mixed. The rankings reflect that mixture of jurisdictional force.
Okay. So let me take a look at the investment attractiveness index, and you were talking about that as, quote, the minerals in the ground. I see that Nevada is number 1, and they're 3rd in the world out of 122. Arizona down at 18th. And it's interesting because Nevada and Arizona over the last few years have been trading back and forth as the #1 mineral producer in the country, non-fuel minerals, so coal is out, but it's been bouncing back and forth. So it's a little surprising to see Nevada as the highest ranked state, but Arizona only down at 18th. And what is that, the 6th or 7th, 6th highest in the U.S., even though we had the largest amount of mineral production last year of all of the states.
Right. So this index is actually a combination of, as I said, it's the mineral potential index, 60%, and 40% is based on the policy perception index.
Okay.
That leads to these rankings. So
Okay.
the investment attractiveness is a combination of how much are you perceived as having in the ground, and how is your regulatory environment perceived with regard to exploring and extracting those minerals.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah.
And so you can see large changes based on changes in your tax regime, if you have native land claims, or if you have an overwhelmingly huge amount of mineral potential, you're going to rank higher.
Okay. Okay, that helps. That puts it in perspective. I think you mentioned looking at the PPI going back, and one of the graphs you shared with us is the PPI going back to 1998. And it looks like Arizona in generally has been averaging somewhere between 60 and 80%. And bouncing around in there, but over the last 5-6 years, it's been a little more uniform, a little more consistent.
Yes, it does look that way. It looks a little less volatile.
Yeah.
2003, for example, seems to have been an anomalous year. I don't know what happened in that year that would have led to the decline. I would guess there was something passed in 2002, some sort of regulatory thing or court finding that led to the downturn and then remediation afterward. But yeah, it does seem relatively stable. I wouldn't go so far as to say that the last. I wouldn't draw much conclusion from the last just 6 years, for example.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, it does seem to have avoided sharp deviations.
Okay.
It's narrowed. The fluctuations have narrowed to between 60 and 80, whereas they had dipped down to as low as 50.
Okay. But now I see one of your other graphs here on regulatory duplication and inconsistencies. It looks like after a few years of somewhat of a regular decline, we had a big jump. And I guess one of the questions I would have is that is there any way that we can target that to specific, maybe a federal decision on a particular mine or some new law being passed? Because it was quite dramatic jump, it looks like.
It is a dramatic jump, and even more so is what's more dramatic in 2014, I think, is the actual shift in the respondents going toward strong deterrent as opposed to mild deterrent, right? The ratio of mild and strong has gone toward the strong side. We can't give it, you'll understand, given 122 jurisdictions and 15 different policy dimensions, we actually can't explain why the perceptions are changing in any given jurisdiction. I'm afraid that's something you'd have to do, and looking at Arizona's regulatory system and asking whether it's a matter of federal changes, state changes, local changes, and of course, again, these are relative rankings.
Right, and Ken, you probably don't, as you mentioned, covering 122 of these, you can't stay on top of everything, but there have been 2 or 3 very high-profile mines being proposed for development in the state that have gotten a lot of public attention, and there's been some big battles at the federal level over some of these. So I think we can kind of interpret that. We'll probably be taking a hard look at that and seeing how that compares to what's happened in previous years. So, but this is the kind of survey that's really helping put us on the, at the front line of figuring out what's going on back here.
Well, and that's the goal, which is one of the things we find from this survey is that there is actually quite, I would almost call it exquisite sensitivity amongst the perceptions of the potential investors to changes in the climate of attractiveness, right? And so if they are seeing very large pushback on proposed projects, if they're seeing their timelines stretch out into, near infinity, if they're seeing a sudden upsurge of regulatory activity, or changes, even worse, just kind of major changes to existing regulation, we tend to see a pretty quick commensurate response in the survey. Uncertainty is pretty much the enemy of mining.
That's a very good point. I think that was the next diagram I was looking at, is that uncertainty concerning environmental regulations. Not that a regulation is really lax or really tough, but the uncertainty about them. And it looks like after 4 years here or so on the chart you were sharing with us, things were somewhat consistent, although changes among the strong versus mild, but we see a big jump in 14, particularly over the strong deterrent to investment over uncertainty.
That's right. I think, and this is not uncommon across a lot of jurisdictions. As you probably know, here in Canada, right, we had a Supreme Court decision that has thrown into question a huge number of potential projects over Aboriginal land claims and whether they'll move ahead. The increasing focus in the United States on environmental regulations federally has been notable. And of course, states are pretty much required to comply with, in the United States, right? The EPA sets the rules. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that to see uncertainty about environmental regulations going up, because we've had a huge, the U.S. has had a huge discussion over whether or not it will implement greenhouse gas emission controls, tighter controls over particulate matter, tighter environmental controls over waterways. There have been a lot of there's been a lot of discussion in the last couple of years over the activities of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, one last diagram that you shared with us was also the uncertainty over areas will be protected. And I know there's talk about, there's been a recent proposal here in Arizona to set aside a large area in the northern part of the state as a national monument. And there's a huge uranium resource up there. So again, in some ways it's a little bit surprising that the increase for Arizona that you show here is relatively minor over that. So there must not be a lot of concern that those kinds of proposals may be moving forward.
That could be it. It also could just be that the proposals came up too soon before we collected the data on the survey for it to really register, right? So we collected the data for the survey roughly in the summertime, in the late summer.
Okay.
And if the proposed new monument came up, say, only in June or a couple months beforehand, it might not have percolated through to the respondents to be detected this quickly in the survey.
Okay, that helps. That
you might see it. You might see it next year.
Next year. Okay. Well, great. Ken, we're running out of time here. I want to thank you very much for joining us. As always, it's fascinating. We've shared your report with a number of other agencies in the state, and I think all of us are tearing into it to see more what we can learn about this. And we are going to put up the URL here because this report is available at no charge on your website.
That's right. All the data is available as well, and we're always happy to talk to people about their particular jurisdiction if they have questions for us. We the mining survey is increasingly used by people around the world, and we're very gratified that what we're doing is validated by the market. That both governments and the industries and associations, they all use the report and basically tend to confirm what we find. Their intuitions tend to conform with the actual findings.
Okay, and I know the last couple of years we've been putting up the information for people in the industry here in Arizona to be able to participate in the survey, and we'll be doing that again on our website, through our blog, and whatever other media we have. So we want to get as many people as possible to participate because this has been a really valuable survey for us.
We want that as well. We're always looking for people to email us and ask to be included in the survey. The survey is a direct to respondent system, so we do require people to send us their email address. We keep everything confidential, but we welcome executives at mining companies around the world to send us their contact information so we can get them in the survey.
Fantastic. Ken, it was great having you on the show. I hope we'll have you back next year. This has been really illuminating, and thanks very much for joining us.
It was a pleasure, and we'll be doing the survey next year.
Okay, great. Good luck
Take
on
care.
it. Right, bye-bye.
Thanks.
The Arizona Mining Review is underwritten by a grant from the Mining Foundation of the Southwest, a nonprofit organization based in Tucson, working to educate the public about mining and mineral resources and the mining industry, and to honor outstanding accomplishments in the mining industry.